Hello everyone, this is update for February 15 and actually 14, 2023, day 357 of the war, end of the date update. So this is catch up and belated update, so apologies for that. Let's just start with strategic news and updates, and we're gonna do walks through the front line. So first is Russian grain. I mentioned before that there were concerns that Russia will not have large crop for 2022. They actually did have actually record one. So only wheat they harvested 104 million tons, which is record. On the previous year was about 76 million tons, and total grains I think is like 150 million tons. So it's huge for Ukraine. It's usually like, let's say, total grains I think is about like 50 million. So it's about three times larger than Ukraine. So all of that wheat it wants to get out and be sold, and Russia trying to sell it to the international market. I think last week they sold 2.9 million tons. So this is like right now the time when there is active selling going on in preparation for the next season. In terms of seeds, so apparently, was the Russian. I wouldn't even call them farmers. It's basically kind of like um, industrial agriculture uh, companies. That's probably a better way to say it. They so they obviously had seeds. They apparently will have seeds for this year, but the interesting twist to this is that Russian parliament is considering banning foreign seeds starting 2024, which obviously will destroy all of these bumper crops. But apparently, the Russian, all of these agricultural, industrial producers will have seeds for 2023. Situation with Ukrainian agriculture is much worse. I mean, people still trying to plant. They obviously have seeds, but there is a bottleneck with exporting. So that creates a huge discrepancy between the price that uh, farmers and some industrial agricultural producers getting because of these bottlenecks. And Russia is actively trying to um, I'd say stop Ukrainian export to wheat using this kind of like inspections that are taking forever, and that really costs increases shipping costs. So that's in a way kind of like a war by other means. It's just economic war to undermine Ukrainians' economy and so on. So this is but I hope it's not surprise to anyone. The war, it's a total war, so it's not at every front, cultural, economical, political, military. It's being waged everywhere. So hopefully, people are not surprised uh, by that. Then there are other interesting news. So, I spoke a lot about this confrontation with China, and it's apparently on the collision course. And what a lot of I would say, some of U.S. companies doing, they are moving their assembly facilities from China to other places in Asia, and many of them moving to India, thinking that this is going to be next China. And what happens? They're getting severely disappointed because it is not going to be next China. There is a reason why China will, become an industrial hub for the world, or assembly facility for the world, manufacturing facility for the world, and India did not. It's really a big cultural problem there. There is total red tape and corruption, so India will never become, um, you know, replacement for China in terms of cost, efficiency, and so on. So this is another reason why the inflation is not going away, because if you're trying to move from China, you're going to much more expensive locations. Even, India sounds like it's cheap because the labor there is cheap, but the problem is there are other sort of hidden and unapparent costs that's related to all of that red tape, and it costs much more than you can imagine. So again, all of these attempts to move from China um, will lead to increase in inflation, and not even mentioning that India potentially is definitely not going to be on the side of the West. It's definitely at the best neutral. So you kind of like jumping from one fire to into sort of another potential fire down the road. Um, so that's what's going on in terms of sort of China, global manufacturing, inflation, and so on. Then, in terms of Russia, what Russia is getting for its crude right now is $50 per barrel, which is not great, but allows them to sort of survive for the Russian state. At the same time, Russian ruble is quickly sinking. The way I mentioned before, that financial situation in Russia for state, especially state, is deteriorating pretty quickly. Will continue to do so because the economy is essentially imploding there. I'm not talking about like basic necessities. Definitely, Russia will have food, so you can see there's huge crop and everything. So there will be gasoline. There will be ability to produce military equipment and so on. But in terms of the standard of living that Russians used to enjoy, which was you know pretty good, I would say, overall. Not everywhere in Russia, but in the major hubs, major centers, it was close to sort of, let's say, uh, poor countries in Europe, such as, well, wouldn't say poor, or I'm not talking like places like, Moldova, Albania. I'm talking more like it was closer to, I'll say, relatively poor countries, like, let's say Hungary, Czech Republic, Poland, so basically Eastern Europe, right? So they approached in their living standards closer to those places in the major hubs, right? I'm not talking about entire Russia because then it's a huge in Russia, and I mentioned this before. There's a huge extreme divide in general in society in the country. So there is this hub of Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, a couple more major centers that those all producing places, and generally commodity producing prices in Siberia. And then if you go to, I don't know, some kind of like places like Vologda, it's going to be horrific, right? So it's a two different worlds in a way in Russia that are living in parallel. Um, so again, the Russian state finances are deteriorating pretty quickly and will continue to do so. I think Russian ruble officially breached 74, approaching 75. So this was essentially a level slightly before pre-war. Um, so because if you remember, the Russian ruble jumped all over like below 100 Russian ruble, like so it was like 150 over per US dollar. Then basically Russian central bank, Russian financial authorities sort of tightened the screws and moved Russian ruble all the way to like 55, 58 um, over time. But now things, it was basically painting, that whole move was fake and was painting the picture, and now things are kind of going back to where uh, you know they should be, where they naturally are, where the market is. And this is, the movie is not done. It's just basically you kind of like snapping the rubber and it goes another direction to its natural state. That's what really Russian authorities were doing for almost a year. They trying to snap the rubber and to kind of paint the picture everything's wonderful while it's not. You can do sort of, you can fight the nature for a little bit, but eventually everyone will run out of energy, will be destroyed by the nature. So this is what's really happening with Russian sort of finances, economy, and so on. At the same time, Russia and China are actively building logistical links. So there is construction of new gas pipelines. There is construction increase in throughput of railroad lines. Russian railroads increased deliveries of goods, basically commodities for the most part, to China. They reported like, I don't remember exact number, but like somewhere in, I think, high teens or mid 20s, 223 million tons in 2022. So the whole like logistics, everything in Russia is being redirected from west to east to China. Basically, used to be very connected with, let's say, Europe or west, and now everything is being shifted and redirected towards China, which obviously no surprise. And the link between the two countries is extremely powerful and extremely strong because Russia naturally complements where China lacks, and China lacks in natural resources and food. So let's say if China wants to wage the war against the West, if it has secured supplies of Russian food and Russian energy, chances of the West to win in that war are pretty slim. Um, just because of the, and I'm saying that India is not going to participate in that war, because in my opinion it's going to be at best neutral. It's definitely, how to say, um, um, hostile towards the West, but not in open way. Uh, and and the last news is um, more of type of like sad curiosity out of Europe. So European Parliament decided to ban internal combustion engine, which means there's no um, gasoline and no diesel fuel cars starting 2035. It looks like this is the move of sort of, okay, we're gonna promise you everything great, but we will not be there by that time. And what really happens at that time, nobody really cares. So basically, just uh, another sort of like make make me feel good lie type of situation. So now let's move to Ukraine. Actually, uh, so the situation is overall there were attacks by Russian missiles. So far, the efficiency, and I mentioned this before, starting from I think starting sometime end of December, efficiency went down significantly. The power distribution system is there. It's being rebuilt and improved thanks to help from the West. So, but in a patchy way, obviously, not in a major way, but it allows it to kind of continue existing. If you look from the balance of, Russian attacks versus you rebuilding it, the rebuilding is winning. Let's put it this way: Russian attacks are too rare and less efficient. So net result is so far this allows Ukraine uh, to continue to exist as one system and actually slowly improve the situation, but extremely slowly. Now let's actually jump to the and then another news about all of the supply of weapons, tanks, aircraft. So it looks like aircraft's over the question, and it feels there is quite a bit of a change in attitude where there is subtle kind of like desire to force Ukraine to negotiate and settle and whatever terms, whatever the front line is right now. Um, I don't know if it's gonna. Well, it's probably not gonna happen, or it will happen in a way that Ukraine simply will surrender, and the West will be facing then Russia directly. So there are sort of. It's in a way kind of like a binary outcome. There won't be mm, like something in the middle, or like freezing it the way the West now really hoping. But we'll see. This is obviously nothing is settled. This is just to some extent speculation. Well, not to some, but it is speculation based on, but say, educated speculation based on understanding of attitude of Ukrainian population. Then, in terms of tanks, uh, as I said before, I just want to repeat this again. This is much ado about nothing. This whatever it's going to be at this point, it's like 20 or 28 or 30 or 40 Leopard 2 tanks. They're not going to change anything. The same as 14 Challenger tanks, not going to change anything. Then Abrams, I don't think they ever coming, so that's completely just a fairy tale. And so the problem was that why they're not going to change is, first of all, institutionally, organizationally, Ukrainian army is not able to utilize these tanks in a way they intended to be used, where they produce maximum efficiency, maximum effect out of them. And they're going to be used just as a Soviet tanks, and as a Soviet, equivalent of the Soviet tanks. It's essentially Soviet tanks. So yeah, it might be a little bit better, but the difference are minor. They're gonna burn the same way if they use as Soviet tanks, the same as T-64, T-72, T-90. They will be sort of burned and lost as quickly as Soviet tanks without much effect. And I think there will be a big disappointment, in a way. I think Ukraine building itself up for big disappointment in the West as well, because there is so much propaganda trumpeting, oh, this is some Wunderwaffe, as Germany was saying in World War II, and there's no Wunderwaffe here. They are not, and they could be extremely, say, dangerous tools and powerful, and they can definitely inflict a lot of damage to the Russian side if they use properly. Problem is that Ukrainian army is not going to be in the current state, will not be able to use it as a system. And the difference is that they need to be used as a system that integrated in the larger system, and then they can be used efficiently. If they used as just as standalone tanks or just group of tanks, not a system, the way how the Soviet tanks are being used by actually both Russia and Ukraine, they will be just, there is no special advantage of these tanks. There is, as I said, there is minor advantage, probably in a sighting equipment, but that's pretty much it. There is not much you can get out of it. So again, this is going to be Ukraine and West setting up for itself a big disappointment. They may sort of you may exchange in terms of like 1 to 2, 1 to 3, but let's say you have like 40 of Leopards. Okay, you destroy, let's say, 100 T-72s or T-90s or even 150. It's not gonna change outcome. Yes, it will be very painful for Russia, but the tank building facility near Yekaterinburg is functioning and building them, and it will be replaced in a matter of 2-3 months. So, but the Leopard tanks are not going to be replaced. They are expensive. I wouldn't say one of a kind, but like there are way too few of them. It's not like Ukraine will be getting pipeline of them every quarter, 40, 50 tanks. This is just sort of like one off, and in a hope that it somehow will change something, and it will not. And that's the whole point, is that Russia has a steady manufacturing facility that allows them to have every month sort of amount of tanks. Versus here, it's just one off, and obviously one off will never win against the flow. It's again this system versus no system. System always wins, and so again, this is going to be big disappointment coming sometime. I don't know, March, April. Maybe it will settle in finally in May. But I think by that time, Ukraine is going to be pretty exhausted. Then another topic is Wagner Group. So it looks like Wagner Group has lost in this internal fight between the regular Russian military command and Wagner Group command. I mentioned this before that there are extreme tension. It's so far politely, how to say, there is exchange of attacks in a polite way between the two. But I'm pretty sure there's quite a bit of internal fight going on. And for whatever reason, Russian president decided to side with the Russian military top. So the Wagner Group got deprived of its source of recruits, which is prisoners, significant source. That's not the only one, but that's significant source that allowed them to do continue their attacks near Bakhmut. And for that reason, they basically are exhausted around Bakhmut, and situation becoming more of a stalemate. And if things don't change, chances to capture Bakhmut for Wagner mercenaries are becoming extremely slim, and definitely not going to happen in 10 days. It's probably may never happen, because there are also apparently Wagner Group is being cut off not only from these recruits, but also from actually military supplies, meaning shells, rockets, heavy military equipment, and you cannot do much without it. So again, so they being sort of, I would say, quietly suffocated of the resources, which even depending on how badly they're going to get suffocated, there might be some even Ukrainian counter attack that will push them. To what extent, I don't know. And this is very sort of unusual, but this is what the fight within Russian system is much stronger, and the tension is much stronger, to the point that the other, let's say, regular Russian military would be happy to see that Wagner mercenaries lost ground. They would allow that to happen without any problem. So this is where everything stands with this whole North Donbass front line, but I'll discuss a little bit more once we go through it. So now let's walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, starting from the very north. The situation along the state border is more or less stable, relatively quiet. No new updates about this potential build-up here on the border between Kharkiv and Sumy region. We'll see what happens there, but so far no news on that. Now let's move to North Lugansk front line. Things here are more or less similar. Russian attacks continuing in this forest area here near Seversky Donetsk river without so far much success. So situation more or less status quo. Now let's look at North Donbass front line. So sort of attacks continue, but they're not anywhere close to what they were. This is just a catch-up update that I mentioned before about 2-3 days ago, that Wagner mercenaries approached this E40 road that goes here. So this is just this is not new development. This is just more updating the map for the previous results. So past 2 days there's no advances. So this is that's why I didn't update here. So this is situation more or less stable since February 13. There are also actually reports of Ukrainian counterattack somewhere in this area, where this H32 road goes between Bakhmut and Konstantinivka, which is here. So apparently Russian troops were a little bit pushed somewhere here. There's no details. All I can say is they apparently were pushed a little bit off the road, but this is not sort of say not meaningful and doesn't mean anything. Pretty much, it's just the point is there was counterattack that was marginally successful, and that it looks like the lack of resources on in Wagner Group starts to show up, and we may see sort of reversal, potentially reversal of the tide. At the best, it will be status quo. At this point, things may change if Wagner Group gets resources again. Some change, political change, which you cannot really predict. It's unpredictable. There is political change. The flow again turned on. Things will change because as I said before, uh, Evgeny Prigozhin is capable. He's entrepreneur by nature, and he's capable entrepreneur. In he can achieve results. So if he's given resources, he will achieve results. But so far, he is being cut off from the resources. This is update for the past. This is also actually update for the past. This being probably 2 3 weeks. That's Ukrainian army has been steadily losing ground in this area. It's kind of like unreported and quiet. So first of all, just want to explain. So Russian troops managed to completely clear up the eastern side of this freshwater channel, and then they made some advances towards Dachna. We're exactly perfectly front line. This is extreme, this is to extent approximation here. It's somewhere east of Dachna. That's all I can say. But basically, as you can see, Ukrainian troops lost ground here as well over this past 2 3 weeks. Now let's move to central Donbass front line. So things here are, how to say, very active but unsuccessful for regular Russian military. Apparently, somehow, Russian military command got carte blanche from Russian president, who really hopes that they're gonna achieve something here by 24th, which they probably will not achieve anything, and then they may be again shift in attitude towards Wagner mercenaries. But so far, um, Russian president placed bets on regular Russian military, which I believe he's going to be severely disappointed with his bets. Now let's quickly check the Zaporizhya front line. Things here quiet, nothing. I didn't update this area, Vuhledar area, so this is really, as you can see, that this is attacks here, everywhere essentially. Velika Novosilka, all key strongholds. Novomikhailivka, Vuhledar, Velika Novosilka, and then they also try to uh, find holes here along this road, which proven unsuccessful. So again, regular Russian military is totally bogged down with, I would say, no light at the end of the tunnel. For how long this is going to be tolerated by the Russian president, nobody knows. It's more of a political question. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and till next time. I don't think I'm going to have update for Friday. Thanks again. Bye bye.